if you can see it on camera, but some of my hair is purple. And I'm extremely proud of it. Okay, hi, welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year! It's the new year, it's 2021. Can you believe that? I don't have any high hopes for 2021 aside from the fact that it's not going to be 2020. I wanted to do a video inspired by Books and Lala's video where she does a year in review, a reading year in review, where she shows all of her books. She categorized them based on her star review, her genres. She does some little stats. And that's what I wanted to do, with a little bit of a twist, because I read books in multiple languages. I read books in my mother tongue, which is Italian. I read books in English, and I read books in French, even though very rarely, because reading French is very hard. So these are all the books that I've read in 2020. Some were digital, some were in physical form, some were in Italian, some were in English. Most of them I previously owned before this year, and some of them were new purchases, even though they're mostly secondhand books that I found in bookshops or online shopping. Here are some close-ups. You might recognize some of the titles. Some of the titles might be the first time that you've seen them, and that's what I'm about. Let's start with some numbers. I read 107 books, and I read books from a lot of different genres. Some genres like historical fiction or non-fiction I read less because I don't tend to prefer them, but I have to specify that I haven't actually read 107 books, because this year I decided to do a reread of two of my favorite manga series. One is Naruto, the other one is Nabari no O. Naruto is 700 chapters of mangas. There are, I think, between 80 and 90 volumes of that, and I didn't. I was very lazy and didn't want to put them into Goodreads, so I actually read a lot more than 107. And Nabari no O is not as long, but I think there are at least like 30 volumes, if I am correct. It could be less, it could be more, but I reread those two series. I decided to reread Naruto because it's one of my childhood favorites, and also because I had forgotten basically everything that went on from the last two arcs of the manga. And I reread Nabari no, which means the King of Nabari, because one of the characters, who is called Yoite, is one of my favorite characters. He's my comfort character, like the best of all time. I enjoy reading from his perspective a lot, and I cried. I cried a lot. This was the year of crying. I cried a lot. So I wanted to split, just like Books and Lance did, all my reading month. So this is January. This is February. March, April, May, a lot of Star Trek in May. June, I read a lot in June. July, August, September, the month of tomes, October, November, and the lonesome December. So let's break it down into some numbers. According to Goodreads, not counting Naruto and Nabari no O, I read 28,783 pages, which feels like not a lot, but if I think about all the short books that I've read and the mangas and graphic novels that I've read, it makes sense. The longest book that I've read this year was a buddy read with my friend Julia, or at Lala's class, for a readathon that we created, and it's It by Stephen King, who in the Italian translation is exactly 1,200 pages, like the exact number. This was the longest book that I've read, and then the shortest The shortest was Moments and the Great Flood by Tove Jansson, who is one of my favorite authors. The Moments are like one of the most precious series that ever existed, I think. And it's exactly 60 pages, but also 60 pages with drawings, so even less. This was adorable. According to Goodreads, all of that, the most popular book, like the book that most people have shelved that I've read this year, is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I read the entirety of this book on the 31st of December, like the last day of the year, because I felt like it. I found the audiobook, I listened to it, there were like 6 hours. The narrator is a very famous person here in Italy. I would have loved to study this book instead of reading it by myself, because a lot of context cues I think I've lost in the text, but it was extremely entertaining, and I don't know, I felt like I was expecting something totally different. So I was kind of disappointed that the beautiful romance that everybody describes is actually not, it takes part in the last percentage of the book, but nevertheless I gave it 4 stars. And then, and this breaks my heart, the least popular book that I've read is actually a manga. It's my favorite manga of the year. It's a duology. This is the 2nd volume of Country Diaries Akikarafue by Aya Ithino. Favorite manga of the year. It was so wholesome, so wonderful. The art was amazing, the pacing, everything was wonderful, and it breaks my heart that this has only like 5 people who have shelved this manga. So I know that the translation is very hard to come by, but if you have the chance, please pick it up. I wanted to break it down, as I said, also in my percentages of what I've read in Italian, what I've read in English, and what I've read in French. So here it is. These are all of the books that I've read in Italian. These are all the books that I've read in English. And this is the only book that I've read in French. Reading in another language other than my own, I think it's wonderful to be able to read books in multiple languages, because as much as I like to read in my mother tongue, because I just like it, I am very fluent in my mother. I speed through books a lot more. I'm faster when I read in my mother tongue. As much as I like to do that, I also like to read books in their native languages. So my aspiration in life is to be able to read in as many languages as I can by the end of my life. So I'm sure everybody is waiting for these answers. What is my average rating, like the number? So I didn't expect this, but apparently I haven't given a book a 1 star this year. So no 1 stars this year. I've given 0 stars, which doesn't mean like a 0 below 1. It just doesn't mean that I don't want to give it a rating. And everybody else is from 2 stars and up, which I love. I don't like to buy books to just hate them. Sometimes it's fun, but then I think about all the money that I wasted, and then it's not fun anymore. But on the flip side, I've read less 5 stars this year than any other of the previous years, so it's not great. My average rating overall is 4.0. Yeah, I didn't expect this, because apparently I've given a lot of books 5 and 4 stars, but I think it's the lack of 1 stars that bring it so high. Last year was, I think, a 3.8, 3.7. This year was okay. It was okay, reading-wise. So I have a video in which I explain all of my 2 stars books. It's my most disappointing books of this year, so if you want to know that, go there. And I'm going to be putting out a video in which I talk about all my favorite 5 stars of this year. But I thought I thought it could be a cool idea to insert now my opinions on my 0-star books and the reason why I felt uncomfortable reading them. Oh, the first one are the only volumes of One Piece that I put as read this year. I've actually read more than 2. Wait, so this is the last volume that I own. This is volume 94 and I own almost all of them. So I put only 2 of the other volumes that I've read this year because some of them, almost all of them were rereads. So the only 2 truly new volumes that I've read were these ones. I feel weird rating manga as when it comes to not standalones, like series as long as this ones, because like these were not originally published to be bound like this. They were originally published to be chapter by chapter and story arc by story arc. Talked about this. I talked about all of my rating mangas, like gripes, in one of my videos. But yeah, I don't know what's the point in rating something that it's not finished. It's like rating a chapter of a book. So I haven't rated this one or the other one. Then this year I actually read a lot of books by Andrea Siman, who is the author of Call Me By Your Name and a lot of other books like Enigma Variations, Find Me, which is the sequel of Call Me By Your Name. And after thinking about it, the age gap makes me really uncomfortable. And if it had been 2 more close-age adults, I would have given it 5 stars because it was objectively, for me, well, that means subjectively, because subjectively the writing was fantastic. I think, and I had given it 5 stars at the beginning, then I felt uncomfortable about it, so I took out the rating, but I indeed read that book. Then I was gifted a manga that it's not actually here, it's in my other house, that it's called... I was gifted this by a friend who I don't think knew this was what it is. The manga is Boy by Ramaru Tsaria. So, by the cover, she thought it was a psychological thriller, which it kind of is a psychological something. It is very graphic when it comes to sex and violence, like extremely graphic, and some of the way in which a romance bloomed between the 2 protagonists made me super uncomfortable. It was oh my god, oh my goodness, I didn't know, and like my friend didn't know. I think she knows now because I talked about it with her, but like that's why it has a 0 star. And then I bought this manga digitally because the cover was super cute and it talked about theater, which I am a super fan. I love going to the theater. Theater performances are one of my favorite things to see. I am in a theater club. The manga in question is Boy Meets Maria by Peyo. Now, the cover is super cute. The story talks about 2 very different boys who meet, and one of them thinks at first that the other one is a girl because he is performing in feminine clothes and has a very high-pitched voice, but then he realizes this one is a boy. And this manga talks about gender identity, and it has heavy trigger warnings with sexual assault and pedophilia, and it broke my heart. It truly broke my heart. And I felt like the trauma that one of the 2 main characters had internalized, and it was rooted deep inside of him. At the end, wasn't exactly like it felt like at the end everything was fine, but it was obviously not. You can't get rid of the trauma of sexual assault in a couple of weeks. It takes a long time, and it takes an insanely heavy amount of work to do. So I was hoping that we were going to a therapist, we were going to talk about our feelings, and it didn't happen as much. This one, it's not that I'm uncomfortable rating it, is that I don't know what to rate it, because the cute parts were so wonderful and the art was so wonderful, and then it literally broke my heart. Now I wanted to talk briefly, like super briefly, about gratefulness, because 2020 was the worst year of my life, but it brought me so many great things, like this channel. This channel is almost 1 year old, and I don't know what to do with it. I feel so happy and so grateful with all of the people that supported me in my journey, all of the wonderful friends that I've made on Book Twitter, on BookTube, or like outside this wonderful endeavor. I would have never thought that talking to a camera could be so therapeutic and so calming and so wonderful. And from the bottom of my heart, truly thank you. Thank you so much. Since 2020 was such a traumatizing and hard year for so many people, I wanted to do some fun categories right now, because I think we deserve it. I think going into 2021, I want to reread some more of my comfort books to bring me joy. So this is not my comfort book. This is not a book that I recommend people. I have an entire blog in which I read it, but it's the book that most made me feel in 2020. It's the book that I think about all the time. It's the book that I think captured loneliness for what it is for me, and it made me think a lot. So the category of most made me think book goes to A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Don't read this book if you had a hard 2020, but if you're in a good place in your life, if you want something that will make you really think, and you've checked the trigger warnings, because there are a lot. It's not everything, it's not trigger warning for everything, but there are a lot of heavy trigger warnings that I think you should check out. If you go into my video, they're in the description. But this book is so dear to me. I read this in a week. It's over 1,000 pages, and that week I think I'm going to remember forever. I wanted to do a comfort books of 2020. These are all the books that brought me comfort and joy and happiness in 2020, which the moments of happiness were sparse and in between, but these books made it a lot more tolerable, if you know what I mean. First one is my shortest book that I've read this year. It's The Moments and the Grey Flood. Everything that has to do with moments brings me joy, and I think it could bring you joy too, because it talks about wholesome little fluffy creatures that just strive for happiness, and it's so wholesome. It talks about family, it talks about friendship, and how much love it is between the moments. So a special mention has to go to the Manga Country Diaries, both volumes by Aya Isino, because I've never felt so happy as when I was reading those mangas, and I hope I can get them in physical form soon. I have two more. One is a graphic novel comic, and then the other one is another manga. Let's start with something more popular, and I think everybody knows what it is. It's Heartstopper by Hales Hosman. This was so wholesome, such a wholesome and yet deep romance between two boys. One is openly gay, but he had someone else tell everybody that he was gay, so he didn't actually come out to his friends it was a forced coming out. And then the other one is questioning his sexuality, is maybe bisexual, who knows? And it brought me a lot of comfort, since it's a school setting, the friendships are wonderful, and it made me miss my friends a lot. This is Strange by Yuriko Tsuyuki. This is a short stories collection, which I usually hate. I usually hate short story collections, but this one's special. It talks about various couple of guys and people with not a very specified gender identity. It's just friendships. Various wholesome, beautiful, and super funny friendships. If you want to have a good laugh or just have a good evening, I super recommend this manga. I hope you'll be comforted by those books. You've reached the end of the video, so go down in the description. There are, as always, some very important links that you can check out, some petitions to maybe sign, some places that you can donate to if you have the means to, and then socials, I have them. If you want to connect with me, I'm always on Twitter, so I always respond. I also have a Goodreads if you want to see what I'm reading, and an Amazon wishlist if you want to see what I plan on reading. You don't have to get me anything, just ignore that part, it's just the wishlist. And I think I'll see you in my next video. So yeah, I think I'll see you then. Goodbye! And Happy New Year! Happy New Year!